Alright, I am back with another video, and today we have another build that was voted for, technically. Last week I made a poll saying, hey, what class do you guys want me to build with next? And Ranger won with, at the time of recording, I think about 40% of the vote, which is pretty significant. So, Ranger. What to do with it? Well, if you missed a recent channel update video I did, you will know that I have a pretty big video project in the works that is currently being made, which has given me inspiration to do this video, which is going to be based on the Monster Hunter video game franchise, or at least inspired by it. And today, the weapon of choice that I'm going to make is the Insect Glaive. So, for those of you who have never played Monster Hunter, basically, the game's kind of classes, I guess you could say, is the closest Baldur's Gate 3 comparison, is basically decided by the weapon you choose to use. There's things like a massive oversized greatsword, or a large katana called a longsword, which, you know, probably doesn't really make much sense, but you get the point. Or like two twin blades, or called dual blades, you know, stuff like that, right? So, the Insect Glaive, what it essentially does is it is, well, I suppose it's more of a polearm, more than anything, but they call it an Insect Glaive, which is basically designed to be this high-flying, kind of fast-attacking sort of polearm type weapon, which you can use to kind of vault over enemies, easily jump onto their backs to be able to do additional damage, or do fast ground combos. Probably one of the most mobile weapons out of Monster Hunter's selection. However, there's only half of its kit. Its other half is its synergy with a special type of insect called a insect, which you basically remote control, kind of like a drone, which can be used to extract certain essences from the monster, which will give you certain things like attack boosts, slight bits of healing, can even do a bit of damage to the monster as well. So basically it's kind of like a two-in-one thing where you're kind of remote piloting this kind of bug that you control and that you actually have to raise, as well as you know, doing your own sort of high-flying combos. So I kind of wanted to try and see if I could capture that with this build. Now, when I think of a Monster Hunter, Ranger is basically the closest thing that comes to mind in terms of the aesthetic and how it works. So I knew this was going to be a Ranger build. The question was, how exactly did I want to build the Insect Glaive? Well, we're going to discuss that here today. Without further ado, let's get into the build. First off, we're going to be playing as a half-elf. Really, Monster Hunters in the Monster Hunter world are human, but I'm not making this a complete Monster Hunter build that has to be as accurate as possible. It's just the concept is inspired by it, and we're going to be picking up some things that would be indicative of an Insect Glaive, so our racial choice is pretty free. And I want to go with Wood Elf, or Wood Half-Elf in this case, just because it is actually going to give us a bit of extra movement speed, which is something I would quite like to get. We get the typical civil militia thing that humans and half-elves normally get, which we don't really need, but this is actually going to give us glaive proficiency right off the bat, if you want to go with that, because we are going to be ending this build with a glaive. You're also going to get dark vision and the typical fey ancestry, meaning that you have advantage on saves against being charmed, and magic cannot put you to sleep. However, like I say, thanks to being a wood elf, we also get that extra 1.5 meters of movement speed, which is going to help a lot. Unsurprisingly, our starting class is Ranger. No shenanigans here, you're getting what you voted for. Ranger is going to give us access to a bunch of things, like all simple and martial weapons, but thanks to our chosen starting class, if you did want to start with something else that didn't get this, then you wouldn't have to worry too much because our weapon of choice is still going to be there. However, we're also going to gain access to light armor, medium armor, and shields. However, we're not going to be using a shield or any type of armor today, although you do have the option to do so if you so choose. Now, moving on to our favoured enemy feature. Really, you can pick anything you like here, it doesn't really matter. I like going with Bounty Hunter just because I quite like having the proficiency in investigation, and if you decide to take Ensnaring Strike on this build, it's just a good thing to have. And honestly, nothing else is really useful. We don't really want proficiency in Arcana or any of those other spells. We're not looking to use heavy armor, so having history proficiency doesn't really fit us either, nor does religion. Bounty Hunter, basically the closest thing. So if you want a Snaring Strike, go for it. We also do get to pick a Natural Explorer, and of course I'm going to go with Beast Tamer. This is going to be the start of us having a little guy that we kind of control, right? By being able to use Find Familiar, you can actually summon a small Spider Familiar, which is about as close to summoning a remote control insect as you're going to get with this build, depending on the path that you choose. I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to the subclass choices. But of course, the insect is always known for flying as well in Monster Hunter, so a flying familiar would also work. Basically, if you kind of just want to have the vibe of you do have a little remote control guy that you control, then flying familiar makes sense. Although it's not really going to have the same combat applications as the Monster Hunter games. Our background, of course, as a Monster Hunter is an Outlander. Nothing really to say here, it's going to give us athletics and survival, and it just makes sense to have. Now, for our ability scores, strength is at 10, just so it's not in the negatives, and even though I do want to have a large amount of jump distance with this build, because obviously Insect Glaive is all about literally being able to pole vault into the air and do big flying combos for massive distances, we don't actually need a lot of strength to get a lot of jump distance out of this build. You'll see what I mean. Dexterity is going to be at 17, because we're going to be bumping this up with a half feat later. You can probably already guess which one. Constitution is at 14. I would like this a little bit higher. If you find room that you want to kind of put a little bit more con into your build, you absolutely can, but it's not necessary. 14 will do just fine, as we're going to be more about dodging hits than we are taking them. Because, again, because Insect Glaive is usually up in the air, and a lot of Monster Hunter's monsters do ground-based combos because they kind of expect you to be on the ground most of the time. If you're high flying around, you actually dodge a lot of attacks, so this is going to be a high AC build. Intelligence is at 8, we don't need it. Wisdom is at 16, this is going to help with our unarmored defense in a bit, so you can imagine how we're getting that, as well as our range of spellcasting, and Charisma is at 8, because we also don't need it. You're definitely not going to be the party face. It wasn't until recently that the Monster Hunter protagonist even started speaking, so they've never really been the most charismatic bunch. Now, on to skill proficiencies, and rangers get quite a lot. Not only do we get our athletics from our background, even though we have our 10 in strength, we're still going to be rocking it with a +2, which is kind of nice. You're also going to have a +5 in stealth if you play the Wood Elf, which is just a nice bonus skill to have on a high dexterity build. We've also got investigation, nature, animal handling, perception, and survival. A pretty solid Monster Hunter lineup of skills, if I do say so myself. Alright, that's level 1. At Ranger level 2, you're going to gain access to a few things, namely a couple of Ranger spells. Now, the first thing you're probably thinking is, oh, of course, he's going to take Enhanced Leap here. No, I actually don't want Enhanced Leap at all on this build, and you'll see why later. For now, we need to take Hunter's Mark. This is another reason why I thought the Insect Glaive would be perfect for a Ranger build, because, believe it or not, the Insect Glaive itself basically kind of has a Hunter's Mark feature. Basically, instead of having to fully manually remote control your insect, you can actually fire off a marking kind of bullet, which lodges itself into the monster and makes the bug automatically attack it for you. Think about how Hunter's Mark synergizes with some features of certain subclasses that you're probably expecting me to use here, and you can see automatically why this is basically a necessity to make this build work. And because we're going to be having a pretty high AC that's going to allow us to dodge a bunch, you shouldn't have to worry too much about the concentration. And this build is not bonus action heavy in the slightest, meaning that you're going to basically always be able to put this up, adjust it, and not have to worry about your spell slot count too much, as this is basically what they're going to be the only spell we'll be regularly casting. It's just like 2024 Ranger. But yes, as for your other spell for this level, we will be taking a few more as we go throughout the build, so it's really up to you what you want to grab. However, if we're really going to stay true to Monster Hunter here, and if we really want to pay an homage to it, there is a part of Monster Hunter culture, its game design, the fan base that is so integral to what Monster Hunter is at its essence. But there is a spell here that if I did not take it, I could not consider myself a true Monster Hunter fan. Goodberry. Basically, if you ever played a Monster Hunter game, you know that one of the kind of fun mechanics is that you can pull out a barbecue and cook up some food, and that gives you some buffs. Buffs that are very, very necessary for each hunt, and also can recover your stamina if your hunt goes on too long, etc., etc. So I wanted a way to be able to make food in the middle of combat. Goodberry. It's perfect for almost every situation, and it gives us a little bit of healing, which Insect Glaive can do. Remember, I said the insect can give you healing. So there you go. It's actually as lore accurate as it can be, except it's a bunch of berries instead of a steak. But you know what I mean. Just go with it. Anyways, for our fighting style, we're not actually going to be needing any of these we don't use a ranged attack with archery, we don't wield a one-handed weapon with dueling, and we don't use two-weapon fighting because we're not dual-wielding here, so the only one we can take is defense, which I'm really happy to, actually. That +1 bonus to armor class is actually going to help us end out with about a 22 in AC by the time this build is done at base, which is going to be really nice. At Ranger level 3, we get to choose our subclass, but first, a spell. And again, really up to you what you want to take here. Again, because the Insect has the ability to heal, it might be nice to have a bit of Cure Wounds, because of accuracy, but also because if you happen to get tanked by the odd attack, even with our high AC, you can patch yourself back up as an action if you need to. But otherwise, Ensnaring Strike as well does obviously work here. Also, Speak with Animals and Longstrider. Movement speed does also equate to jump speed, so we will be taking Longstrider at some point. So really, it's up to you. I would probably recommend that you have a more dedicated healer in the party, but Cure Wounds is still a nice little extra addition to have. But although we are only going to have a maximum of level 2 spell slots, so you're not going to get the most out of it, but hey, you never know when it could just save you from a condition like Maimed or something. So it's worth having around in my opinion, but we can come back and pick other things later. Now, the subclass. This is where people's opinions on this build are going to deviate wildly, depending on how much they're kind of into Monster Hunter. Now, let's talk about Beastmaster to start. Beastmaster gives you an actual companion that you control, and compared to how the Insect Glaive plays in Monster Hunter, having an actual remote companion that you control is basically what it is. And of course we can use this to summon either a crow if we want to keep to the whole having a bug that flies type thing, even though it's not really a bug, or a spider if we really want to summon a arachnid. It's not actually a bug, is it? Arachnids are a type of bug. Are they? No. Someone correct me on that in the comments. Anyways, so technically this might be the most accurate way to build it, if you want to specifically focus on the fact that it has an independent control that you have to manage. However, obviously the other choice is Swarmkeeper, and that is what I'm going for today, because I do believe that the abilities that Swarmkeeper gets for our Ranger make the most sense in terms of replicating Monster Hunter's mechanics. Beastmaster also works, but for a different reason and in a different way. But the problem is as well that Beastmaster also takes 11 levels. Let's just be real, it takes your full leveling scheme to make the animal companion worth it in the late game, so Beastmaster just doesn't have a lot of room for build making, and as such I don't think it fits this build either, because obviously I do want levels of Monk in this build, which I forgot to get at level 2, which I was supposed to do. We'll cycle back to that. But anyways, you could wear light or medium armor up until this point, it's whatever, doesn't really matter too much. We can take the Monk levels whenever we want, it doesn't matter, it's fine, it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. But anyways, Swarmkeeper is going to give us access to a bunch of different things. Namely, our first thing is going to be Praise Scent. So remember when I said that by using Hunter's Mark we were replicating the Insect auto attack effect? Well, that's what this is. It's literally that. Our swarm that we're going to get, which I'll talk about in a minute, is going to get an additional bit of damage whenever we attack someone with our hunter that has our hunter's mark. So yeah, it's literally you and your insects working together to deal more damage and give you a buff. That's Insect Glaive in a nutshell. You're also going to get access to Mage Hand, which is a remote control companion. Not an insect, but it makes sense, and it's meant to be flavoured as your swarm being able to literally form and pick up things for you, Winnie the Pooh bees style, which is kind of fun, as well as we're going to get the Fairy Fire, again surrounding someone with a bug to give you kind of an attack buff. Like, it surrounds them with like odd ethereal bugs. Again, it does make sense, it does, because the Insect can actually spread powders, which if you attack them, they explode and deal like status damage, elemental damage, stuff like that. Depends on the kind of Insect that you make. So Fairy Fire kind of having the ability to put down an area where enemies are more vulnerable also does make sense. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised how much I can really make Swarmkeeper and Insect Glaive line up. Not just thematically, but mechanically. Now, for your swarm, this is kind of up to you. As I said, in Monster Hunter, you can raise your Insect to do various different things. You can have it built for raw attack, you can have it built for status effects like Paralyzasis, or you can build it into elemental damage like lightning, etc. So really, any of these options work. I would say Flurry of Moths is probably the least accurate because we don't really have psychic damage in Monster Hunter, unless you count the drop rates. Seriously, some of the materials you need to craft armor and weapons are like a 2% drop rate from a monster. It's rough out here when those fights are like, can be up to half an hour each. Anyways, so Flurry of Moths, probably not. But Legion of Bees, if you want pure raw power through piercing, or Cloud of Jellyfish, both work. And I'll be honest, I prefer Cloud of Jellyfish for this build, mainly because I haven't used it yet, but it does also work. So, let me explain what Cloud of Jellyfish can do. They can cause your attack to deal extra lightning damage, so an elemental insect, I guess, as well as potentially shock your enemy. You can choose to have them shock, which will make it so they have disadvantage on ability checks and saving throws using dex, and they cannot take reactions, basically the same as Shocking Grasp, and you can teleport to a safer location after making an attack. So basically, when you make an attack with your melee weapon, or your ranged weapon, you will be able to apply one of those effects, which feels pretty good. It's just basically extra damage, which again is what your Kinset gives you. It gives you extra damage once it kind of attacks a monster and brings back its essence towards you. So while we're not going as far as that with the mechanic, we're still kind of getting the things that Insect Glaive does with this ability. And again, I've not actually used Cloud of Jellyfish left yet in a build. I've used bees and I've used moths. Moths I've used to great success. Bees, not so much, but still kind of fun. Cloud, the jellyfish, that's a new one. So we'll go with that. At character level 4, you are going to have the ability to change your swarm if you like, so if you don't like jellyfish, you can swap it out. You can also replace a spell at this level. I think I'm quite happy with our spell choices so far, but the main thing here is that we're going to get a feat, and this is where we're going to start to get Insect Glaive's mobility with the athlete feat. We get to round out our dexterity to an 18, but also our jump distance increases by 50 feet. And while we're prone, 50 feet, 50%, my apologies, 50 feet would be insane. When you are prone, standing up uses significantly less movement. Pretty good, all things considered. Basically, it's just here to give us that Insect Glaive, je suis mont kind of flavor of being able to jump a lot. And if anybody gets that reference I just made in French, honestly, you were definitely a Monster Hunter fan. But anyways, Athlete's going to be great for the theme of the build. Probably not 100% necessary. You could take something else to boost your dexterity instead if you like. But I really like Athlete here, so I'm going to go with it. And finally, at Ranger level 5, we're going to gain access to extra attack, which is what I've been gunning for. I really want that extra attack to give us those fast swinging combos. At this point as well, you're also going to get the web spell, which doesn't really fit the build, but hey, it's a nice thing to have, and web is surprisingly tricky to get in some builds. Trust me, I've tried to build Spider-Man before, and I actually succeeded. There's a video on the channel, and so I just kind of made it a Forgotten Realms Spider-Man. But otherwise, yeah, web is a fun one. You can use it if you like. Now we're up to level 2 spells, but honestly, not really a fan of any of the level 2 options for this build. Spike Growth has a nice bit of synergy though, since you could basically jump over whatever you set at this point. Like, you could just set it down, forget about it, jump over it, and make your enemies run back and forth over it to catch up to you. That's kind of fun, but honestly, not really fitting the build. Really, at this point, I'm just going to take Longstrider for more movement speed. At Ranger level 6, we're actually going to hold off on that, because now we are going to go back and get some of our Monk shenanigans. Now, again, you can take kind of the 1 level dip of Monk at any point in the build after level 1. Hell, I might even take it at level 2 if you're so inclined, since you will be using a weapon in the early game that will work with the bonus unarmed attack you get from attacking with a Monk weapon, so might be beneficial to take it around level 2, but anywhere from level 2 to 6 is about where you want to take it. So, here we go. At Monk level 1, we're going to gain access to a few things that we're going to want. Flurry of Blows is a nice way to use a bonus action, although we don't really need to use this all the time, and we're not really going to have the key points to do so, unfortunately, as we're not going to be taking a massive amount of levels in Monk. But this will be a nice bit of extra damage if you just need to finish someone off on that turn, which you will be able to do. We're also going to gain access to Unarmored Defense, allowing us to use our Dexterity and our Wisdom modifier when not wearing armor. That we are going to be taking advantage of. We're also going to be able to use Martial Arts Dexterous Attacks to allow our unarmed strikes to use our Dexterity. We're going to have Martial Arts Deft Strikes to allow our attacks with our Monk weapons, and Unarmed Strikes to deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage. This will scale up to a 1d6 by the time the build is done, so we get a nice bit of extra damage. And if we make an attack with a Monk weapon, we can make another Unarmed Strike as a bonus action. Unfortunately, by the time this build is done, if you want to stick with the idea of using a glaive, which I have here, you won't actually be able to get the bonus action on Armor Strike because it has the two-handed property, meaning that it's not a monk weapon. However, if you decide to stick with a quarterstaff, or anything that is one-handed, so maybe a spear if you're so inclined, that will work, so it's kind of up to you how you want to play that game. Otherwise though, how could I make the Insect Glaive and not use a glaive? I mean, I'd feel pretty mad with myself if I didn't. At monk level 2, we're going to get some pretty cool things, namely the ability to dash as a bonus action with Step of the Wind, or imply disadvantage on attacks against us, and then give ourselves advantage on dexterity saving throws with this handy ability called Patient Defense. We also do get Step of the Wind Disengage, but I didn't find myself using that too much in our testing. Since our AC was so high, it didn't really matter, and I just felt like using Patient Defense was always the better option just for, you know, kind of getting away from things and being able to jump away. Obviously dashing, gonna double our movement speed, which means we can just jump across the whole map in a single bound at this point, probably, because we got Monk's Unarmored Movement as well on top of this. It's just, whew, we have a lot of movement speed and a lot of jumping ability already thanks to Athlete, the monk levels, and this, you're going to be able to high fly across the map and lay the smack down on your enemies pretty hard, which is fun. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, this is where your path diverges. You see, there is no set monk subclass for this. I want to go to level 4 of monk so that we still get all of the feats on this build. We still get 3 feats. Otherwise though, we're just going to be kind of getting some general bonus stuff here. So really, it's entirely up to you what you think is the most appropriate for this build. I'll explain my choice of what I went through in my testing in a minute, but let me go over the options for you. Way of the 4 elements will give you some elemental-based spells. Now, while Insect Glaive obviously doesn't really have any spell casting, in fact, Monster Hunter isn't really that type of game, or at least it wasn't until they started adding the Final Fantasy stuff, but I digress. Way of the 4 elements will give you some sort of elemental-based attacks, some of which do actually fit the build, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a bit. Way of the Open Hand would obviously make the most sense if you want to just keep this as like a vanilla kind of thing, giving us these extra bonus action effects, but because, again, we're not really going to be using our Flurry of Blows too much, because we're mainly going to be spending our bonus action to jump, if not applying Hunter's Mark, I honestly don't think Flurry of Blows is going to come up too much, and I'd much rather spend my key points on things like Patient Defense if I need to, or Step of the Wind or something like that. So I actually don't see us using Flurry of Blows a lot. Again, our main damage is going to be coming from the Glaive, so not too actually fussed about Way of the Open Hand. But technically, I guess it's the most accurate. Whatever. Well, let's go over the other options. Way of Shadow doesn't fit, but has some nice movement abilities. Being able to hide, use Minor Illusion, cast Pass Without Trace, Darkness, yada yada. Could be some fun stuff, but it doesn't really fit the build. But hey, I'm just letting you pick any monk subclass for this build, so honestly, it's a pick your favourite situation, so if your favourite's Way of Shadow, go for it. Way of the Drunken Master doesn't really do anything for us either, unless you want to be a drunken monster hunter, which I'm sure isn't dangerous at all. You could get proficiency in performance and a bit of a drunken technique, where if you use your Flurry of Blows, you get the benefits of a disengage, which actually could be pretty nice for a high mobility build such as ours. But my subclass of choice is Way of the 4 Elements, and I'll explain why. First off, we get a little bit of recovery with our key, being able to use Harmony of Fire of Water to regain half our key points while not in combat, rounded down, once per long rest. So it gives us a little bit more resources before we have to start resting a bunch, which is nice. However, the Disciple of the Element spells, while I did say that we don't do any spell casting, that doesn't mean that the Insect Glaive doesn't have some abilities that I feel like could fit some of these options. Let's talk about it. First off, the Fist of Unbroken Air. Now, as I said, we do have the ability to fire off a ranged attack that fires this little puff of like scented air. Like, I sound like kind of like it was like a bullet that lodges itself in, but it's kind of hard to describe. It's more like a dart that kind of has this like pheromone scent that causes the insect to attack. So saying that we're firing out a Fist of Unbroken Air as like that kind of mimicking that ranged attack while still kind of keeping things in character, I don't know, could be pretty fun. It can also knock enemies back as well, so if you feel like you are like, if you do like kind of jump away, and then you can kind of punch them at a range to knock them even further back, forcing them to dash towards you, it's a fun little bit of synergy, although it is going to drain our key points, but it's a nice option. I like having it. And since we're not going high enough of a level in high enough of our monk levels to actually get any of like the later subclass abilities, I honestly think Disciple of the Elements is gonna give us the most anyway, so I feel like having Fist of Unbroken Air is nice. And again, because we're a high flyer who likes to ride the winds and rush at the gale spirits to potentially knock our enemies off balance, and pushing them back 5 meters could actually also be pretty fun. For those of you that don't know, off balance that gives the affected entity disadvantage on strength and dex checks, and attack rolls against them have advantage, which could be really nice when you see what feats I've picked. As for your final one, really none of these other ones fit. Fangs of the Fire Snake could be a nice extra bit of damage on a glaive attack, because this does trigger extra attacks. You could go Fangs of the Fire Snake, wham, buff yourself with fire, so maybe you have a fire elemental kinsect. Maybe you could say the fire you shoot out is your kinsect going in for an attack, and then you get a bit of extra damage on your next glaive attack, which could actually be pretty fun. That could also work. And like I say, because you can infuse your kinsect with various elements, you could say the Blade of Rime is an ice kinsect or whatever. Thunderwave could just be you manipulating the winds even more to push enemies away from you, although we kind of have a lot of that already. You get Chromatic Orb, Burning Hands, really Water Whip, which is a bit of a unique bit of fun. It's entirely up to you. But since we've got a theme of doing things in this video that I've not actually done on the channel yet, screw it, we're going with the meme pick. It literally has nothing to do with the build, but now you can officially say I actually took Shaping of the Ice in a build. You can make a cold drink to go with our good berries. Wait, actually, hang on. That makes sense. And not only are we cooking, we're cooking the full meal, we got a bit of food and a nice cold drink. You know what? It's the lore pick. We're taking it. I can't tell if this is a joke video or not at this point. I'll let you guys be the judge. At level 4 of Monk, we're going to get access to Slowfall. Kind of makes sense to have resistance to falling damage when we're going to be jumping around like some crazy flying acrobat. It does make sense. So yeah, Slowfall, we'll take that. We're also going to gain access to another ability score improvement or feat. And at this point, our dexterity is pretty good. We're actually going to have a total of 20 at this point, which means our attack accuracy is going to be pretty on point. And we're going to have a bunch of ways to boost our accuracy with using things like advantage, as well as, you know, we're going to have some boosts that I'll talk about in a sec. So believe it or not, we're slapping on Great Weapon Master onto this build, wherever it is. There it is. I use Great Weapon Master in my testing. It just gives the build an extra bit of oomph to its overall power scaling that I think really does help it out. Sometimes you have to play it a bit careful to be able to mitigate the downside, but overall I just found the boost in power to really give this build what it needs. This allows us to gain an extra bit of flat 10 damage, so just a flat 10 additional damage on all of our attacks with our glaive at the cost of a -5 attack roll penalty. And as such, we can do that. We can kind of mitigate that penalty with a bunch of different items and effects and such like that. Whenever we land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon attack, we can also attack as a bonus action on that turn, giving us some of Insect Glaive's high-flying fast combos by being able to attack at least 3 times in a turn if we manage to kill someone, which is pretty nice. There are some other options though. Polearm Master obviously makes sense for kind of fitting with the glaive theming. If you want to go with that, it's another way of getting a bonus action attack, and you can make opportunity attacks when a target comes within range. Honestly, very good for jumping around, but I really did feel like the Great Weapon Master kind of benefits were really good on this build just for the overall damage output. But if you want to play something a bit more interesting, then Polearm Master might just be for you. So it's between Great Weapon Master or Polearm Master in my opinion. Honestly, dealer's choice here. I'll put it in the description that you can pick either or. Since we're not needing to go to level 5 of Monk, let's jump back over to level 6 of Ranger. We now get to choose another favoured enemy, and I kind of already explained why none of these really are going to do much for us. I would say, especially since we don't need to wear heavy armour, I'm just going to go with Sanctified Stalker to give us Religion and Sacred Flame as another potential ranged attack in case we need it. We also get access to another Natural Explorer. It's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. Any of the Wasteland Wanderers often honestly makes sense. Monster Hunters are pretty hardy against the adverse effects of cold and heat, as well as poison. I mean, they just eat everything. They eat everything. There's a skill called Mushroom Mancer, which literally, if you level it up enough, if you get enough points in it, you can just eat any mushroom you find off the ground and it will give you some sort of beneficial effect. It's kind of nuts. They're like magic mushrooms. I don't get it either. Urban Tracker is also great though, because it'll give you proficiency in Sleight of Hand, and since we already have proficiency in Stealth, this kind of makes us a weird rogue. I kind of like that, but really, pick anything you like. You can also change your swarm if you want to still, and you can replace a spell again if you want to. Entirely up to you. Ranger level 7 is going to give us access to another spell of our choosing. Really, it's again up to you. And again, you guys are probably really thinking at this point, why the hell hasn't he taken Enhanced Sleep? We don't need it. Trust me. Instead, why don't we finally grab that Ensnaring Strike so we actually have it available to us? And finally, Ranger level 8, giving us access to difficult terrain land stride. I read that backwards, but it doesn't matter. You're going to become an expert in moving through the wilderness. Difficult terrain no longer slows you down. Never really mattered for us as we were going to be jumping over it anyway, but hey, we get it for free, so why not? We're also going to get to choose our final feat of the build, and at this point, bump up that wisdom. Because it gives us a little bit of extra AC, helps our spell save DC, as well as a few other things that I'll get into later. So yeah, that's the leveling. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a high-flying, glaive-swinging ranger. You're going to have a lot of attack range, obviously, because you're using a polearm, combined with the fact that you're able to jump around the map and pretty much get to anywhere you want, is kind of cool. You're going to be able to dash around using Step of the Wind, just making you so bloody fast. Oh, and I just realized I forgot a Swarmkeeper ranger ability that we got, which is Writhing Tide. How did I miss that? Did that show up in the tooltip? Let me know if I just somehow completely missed that. Basically what it does is this gives you a straight up flying speed. So if we don't want to jump around because we think it's going to incur us some sort of falling damage, or it doesn't quite get us where we want to go because we don't have a direct line of sight, we can actually choose to fly instead to be able to curve around corners, which makes sense because the Insect Glaive does have the ability to change direction in mid-air. So I'm going to flavor this less as a straight up flying, and more of just we do a pole vault and then readjust mid-trajectory. So now we are probably the most mobile build I've ever made in this game, because we have an insane amount of movement speed, an insane amount of jump distance, and we can even fly without needing to dip into tadpole powers. That's kinda nutty. So yeah, Writhing Tide. How I forgot to mention that, I have no idea. Uses its own unique resource called Writhing Current. So it can only be used 3 times per long rest, which kinda sucks, but otherwise, it's an in a pinch kind of situation thing anyway. Situational at best, but still useful to have. So yeah, that is the build. Like I said, we got all the stuff we kind of want here. Again, we got big amounts of damage between Hunter's Mark, our prey sent with our Swarm doing extra damage and having extra utility, plus Great Weapon Master. Like, you are going to be doing an absolutely insane amount of damage. At this point, you would be doing at least 1d10 plus 17, adding on the 1d6 from Hunter's Mark and whatever extra damage, another 1d6 from your Swarm. You just have a lot going for you, which is really, really nice. And you've got the defensive actions and mobility to back it up. But of course, like with all my builds, the items that we select definitely give it a bit of a buff. Let's talk about it. So, first up, our weapon of choice. I mean, this was obvious, we're going with the Dancing Breeze. This is the only dexterity-based glaive in the game, so it was the only one that was going to work with this build. But that doesn't mean it doesn't come without benefits that fit the build as well. It's going to give you the rush attack, which allows you to rush past an enemy, dealing a bit of damage to them, possibly pushing them off balance, but also doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, so if you need to dash to someone without taking opportunity attacks from nearby enemies, this is really good, and I actually used it in my testing a couple of times. You got things like Brace, which allows you to sacrifice some of your immaculate movement speed, so it's not really a debuff. Basically gain Savage Attacker for the turn, and you can do that once per short rest. So that's actually pretty good. Just once per turn, you can decide to do even more damage effectively. Very nice. But also, Whirlwind Attack. Well, kind of unique to this glaive. This is usually reserved for things like the Belm weapon, but we get it here. You can strike out against all nearby foes, making separate attack rolls against each target. So basically, you get a radius around you, do a big spin swing, and you could do that massive Great Weapon Master damage to everyone within the radius. So if you end up being surrounded, you just smack them all, which is kind of cool. Very situational, but still kind of cool. Anyways, though, that is our weapon of choice. In the early game, though, I do recommend you pick up a quarterstaff, and I quite liked, and this is a weird one, the Staff of Arcane Blessing. Normally, this is reserved for spellcasters, especially Gale, because, you know, it's kind of a Mistra thing. But I actually think this works really, really well on anybody who can wield a quarterstaff as a weapon, like a monk, because this gives you the ability to use Mistress Blessing. Whenever you use the Bless spell, so you could even take a dip in Cleric to do it, you can get an additional 1d4 to saving throws and weapon attack rolls, and additional 2d4 to spell attack rolls. So basically what this means is Bless is going to give you a 2d4 buff to any of its normal stuff, and then it would be a 3d4 buff to spell attack rolls. That's pretty good. For an early game quarterstaff, that's amazing. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with like a +1 weapon buff, but you can always use the draconic Glaive with draconic elemental weapon to bolster that up a little bit if you decide to, and this also gives you a casting of bless once per long rest if you don't have it. And again, that can be one of the things that can help offset Great Weapon Master if you so desire, although there would be some shenaniganery between using this and then swapping to the glaive, but hey, I just thought it was kind of a nice buff because again, the Insect is about buffing you in a way to allow you to do more, and bless is literally that. I really should make a dedicated support build around this staff one day because it is very interesting. Let me know if you'd want to see that. But anyway, I just thought it was a fun, flavorful option that I don't really talk about enough on this channel, so there you go. Right, moving on to our equipment. Our headband of choice is the Circlet of Hunting. You can pick this up right at the start of Act 2, and you gain a 1d4 bonus to attack rolls against creatures marked by Hunter's Mark, True Strike, Fairy Fire, or Guiding Bolt. Of course, we can use either Fairy Fire or Hunter's Mark with this build, so that's a pretty easy way to get a 1d4 bonus. That helps with Great Weapon Master, obviously, Hunter's Mark going for the more damage but less accuracy option, and Fairy Fire going for the much more accurate option. So you have a lot of options to make sure your weapons are going to hit no matter what. So the Circlet of Hunting fits nicely on this build, and again, it's called the Circlet of Hunting. We are a monster hunter. It makes sense. We've also got the Graceful Cloth as my chest piece of choice. I know, pretty standard option, but it's powerful. We get a +2 to our dexterity, which allows us to bump that up to a nice round even 20. We're also going to gain Cat's Grace, giving us advantage on dexterity checks, and only take half damage from falling, so I guess the monk feature was a bit redundant, but hey-ho. We also get Nimble as a Cat, giving us a +1 bonus to dex saves and increasing our jump distance by an additional 1.5 meters. So it's even more jump distance, which means it's perfect for this build. However, I wanted this to be a highly defensive build, being able to dodge most attacks, so because we're not actually wearing armor or using a shield, despite having a two-handed weapon, we get to benefit from the braces of defense, giving us a whopping +2 to our AC for not wearing armor or holding a shield, meaning that we're sitting at a comfortable 22 AC, which is kinda nice. Now, for the boots, this is kind of an important thing. We have the Bone Spike boots here. Obviously, picked because it increases our jump distance, but it also gives us that +1 bonus to our armor class and saving throws as long as we are not wearing armor or holding a shield, so it's another way to stack AC. However, I picked this for another very important reason, the Brutal Leap feature. You see, the Brutal Leap feature is kind of important to the identity of what we're trying to do here, the Insect Glaive. So in Monster Hunter, I mentioned it briefly before, but there is a mechanic called mounting a monster. Don't. Basically, what it means is that you are able to, if you do enough aerial attacks on a monster, you can actually latch onto its back and be able to do a few extra attacks, open up some weak spots on it, and then knock it to the floor for you or the rest of the team to go crazy on for a little bit of a time. Yeah, I'm not making that analogy any better, am I? Long story short, Brutal Leap allows us to jump onto a target and knock it prone. That is as close to the mounting mechanic in Monster Hunter as we are ever going to get. So I kind of had to include it in this build because, again, obscure reference, but je suis monte. So, Brutal Leap. Had to have it on this build, and the rest of the benefits are just a perfectly finely wrapped bonus. I know what you guys are like. I should not have even have said mount, but, you know, whatever. Perhaps I'm the dirty mind here. Definitely, 100%. Anyways, now let's talk about the early shoot option because it is actually going to fit into our accessory choice here. In the early game, grab Mistress Grace because it gives you the ability to cast Featherfall at will infinitely as a bonus action. So yeah, all of our high flying and jumping, we never have to worry about falling damage, which again probably makes both the Nimble as a Cat feature and the Monk feature slow fall redundant. Oh well. But we are going to be swapping this out for the Bone Spike boots later on, which means falling damage becomes a problem again. Unless, around the same time, you grab the Corvid token. While wearing this amulet, the wearer's jump and flying speed increase by 1.5 meters, so again, even more jump speed, and they gain the Featherfall condition permanently, as long as they're wearing the amulet. You also get the ability to transform into a raven. Probably not going to do that, but the permanent Featherfall is exactly what we're after. However, in the early game, you might want to pick up the Moondrop Pendant. If you ever drop below 50% HP, you'll never provoke opportunity attacks, meaning that you can use your high-flying jumping antics to just escape any situation, which is kind of nice. Moving on to the rings though, this is pretty standard affair. We start off with Crusher's Ring. It says Emerald Ring, ignore it. Crusher's Ring gives you an additional 3 meters of movement speed, again adding to our insane mobility. And finally, the Ring of Jumping. The reason I didn't take Enhanced Leap this entire build is because you can obtain the Ring of Jumping fairly early on, and it gives you a usage of Enhanced Leap, tripling your jumping distance once per short rest as a bonus action. And I'll be honest, since this doesn't cost a spell slot and you're going to be short resting after every combat encounter, once per short rest is pretty much all you need in this game. So yeah, this is just a better version of the Enhanced Sleep spell in the form of an item. You're welcome. So with that, you can, as I said, just jump incredibly stupid distances, which is amazing. And yeah, that is the build. Overall, I'm pretty proud of it. I think it was a surprisingly synergistic way of actually getting a decently accurate Insect Glaive build, which I was not expecting when I first booted up this game to give it a try. I thought it was going to be a lot harder. And trust me, some of the other Monster Hunter weapons will definitely be harder, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, as for our fashion, as always, Fear Tailor's Camp Clothing and the Favouring Colours mod are applied, available on all platforms, consoles, etc, etc. First up, Fear Tailor 5 Custom Armour. It's just a kind of different version of the leather armour without sleeves, but I like it, and it's undyed. Following up with the Footwear version 2, dyed in the Merkle Green dye, giving us this nice kind of huntery ranger look, and it's happened again. The guy's gone. He stepped into the corner. You know what? You can stay there now. You're not even on screen anymore, except for in the menu. But yeah, that is the build. And what can I say? I think, for trying to build a Monster Hunter weapon in Baldur's Gate 3, this wasn't the worst attempt. I'm sure some people could think of different ways this could be done, but I do really like it. I always feel like it's an interesting alternative take on my old Final Fantasy Dragoon build, if anybody remembers that. That was also like kind of another high-flying, polearm-wielding build, which was kind of fun, and this is a very different take on it. Now, as for its efficacy in combat, it's honestly just down to luck, which is kind of a weird thing to say in this game, but basically, you're going to be doing a ton of damage, you have as much ways to mitigate your attack's chance to hit as possible, but it's not really always going to hit. You just kind of have to pray that you do. But we have so many ways of giving ourselves advantage and buffs that it's not too much of an issue. As well as the fact that, despite having 22 AC, if you do get hit, you're probably going to drop that concentration. I found it okay. I didn't think I was dropping concentration too much when I did get hit, but on the times where it does and you lose your Hunter's Mark, it does suck a little bit, because that is a big chunk of damage you're missing out on. So really, the DPR of this build is really luck dependent, which does kind of suck, but honestly, you could say that about anything in this game. But yeah, that's it. That's the build. Nothing else more to say here. I'm pretty much done. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.